Welcome back to the Astronomy Garage. I'm your host, Reflactor, and we have a very special telescope this time. You know, I've always wanted one that came in a box, and that means I had to get one that was pretty old. As it turns out, this telescope and myself are both from the early 1970s. Go figure. This also has something in common with my childhood, in that my first telescope was in the early 1980s. It was a gray refractor that came out of the JC Penny Christmas catalog. And this one is from the early 70s. And it is called the Penncrest. Here's the user manual, right? This is, I guess this was a JC Penny brand name, but this is from 73 or 74, I believe. It is a refractor. It's on an equatorial mount. I know that I normally do Dobsonians, but this one, I found it in somebody's garage under a crushing weight of basically junk, even more junk than my garage here. I wanted to bring it back to life and see how it worked. I believe it is actually made in Japan. Now, I have to admit, I've already actually taken care of the crate, the box itself. It was covered in some kind of gross dust / goo, so there was a lot of cleaning outside. Everything that was metal was totally banged up and covered with a slight amount of rust and some kind of corrosion that I also don't want to know. But it's all been straightened out. I've replaced any screws that needed replacing, and the metal parts look pretty good. So let's go ahead and open up this Penncrest model 2593 and see what we got. All right. Ta-da. Let's do an initial tour. You can see it uses styrofoam at both ends. It has a nice little diagram on the lid that tells you where everything goes. And here is more documentation. Look at that. Let's remove this part. Get a nice big view. Now, let's remove these wooden legs. Let's take a look at these guys. They're a little bit bent. They've got that antiqued, well, I think that might be antiqued hammer black paint, but it actually, it looks like it's just genuinely corroded. I'll straighten these out. I don't know if I'll paint those. The paint, it doesn't look too bad. They have just these little screws down here that keep it from sliding. And it looks like one of the legs has a rubber tip. And these just have a metal shaft. The rubber tips are gone. But let's take these out. Let's see what we got. Put these out. All right. So there are basically 3 styrofoam inserts. What's in this one? We have a bag of little screws and doodads. Those will come in handy, and some 50-year-old silica gel, I guess. Don't eat that. Boy, I wonder if that's still any good. I'll taste it later. Just kidding. Let's lift this foam block out and see what we got here. All right, there's some good stuff here. First, we have the big equatorial mount, and we have a diagonal. And I should mention this has the little eyepieces, the 0.965 inch eyepieces. There's a 20 millimeter and a 6 millimeter. Can't really get it out of there. Here is a filter of some kind and a Barlow 3X Barlow. All right. Oh well. And there's this thing. Which is, it looks like one of those prisms from the binoculars.
It's looking a little bit dirty. We're going to have to clean it.
Here is the focuser tube. Looks pretty nice. It's all metal. The paint's in very good condition. Look at that. Let me put that back. Let's move down here. Now, according to the diagram, and I looked this up, this is a moon and sun projection thing that screws onto a long shaft. And okay, oh, there's a nice little eyepiece tray. And there's a it's got a built-in light, which is kind of neat. This is a really old light. We'll test it. I doubt it still works. It's very old, and I assume there's batteries that go in there. Probably down in there. All right. And of course some slow motion control cables. Boy, those might be very handy. I don't know if those are 8 millimeter or 6 millimeter. So there it is. It's in pretty good shape. This is a 60 millimeter. So it's basically, what is that, 2 1/4, 2.5 inches, something like that. And we go down here. What do we have? Well, we have the counterweight. We have another eyepiece, 12.5 millimeter. And we have this. Oh, this is this viewfinder is, it's seen better days. It'll probably work. Oh, there's a piece. I think this is the part that holds the moon projector shield on the end of it. Let's go ahead and pull all the parts out of this and set it up. I have not set it up yet, so let's see how it goes together. If you're enjoying this video so far, please go ahead and gently push that like button. And if you'd really like to support the Astronomy Garage channel, please check out my Modern Adventure series that's available on Amazon. The ebook for these is only 99 cents each. And if you're a person that likes to listen to stories while you're driving, well, the audiobooks are also available. So this is the documentation. It is a Penncrest equatorial refractor. This envelope came with it and it had some other documentation in it. What else is in here? So we've got this interesting historical astronomy map, right? Look at that. It's got lots of famous people and famous items from astronomy. Pretty slick. Right, that's neat. Printed in Sweden, but okay. It's a bit unusual. We have something here that looks like it came from a newspaper. And that's what I bet it did. Interesting. Is there a date? There we go. October 28th, 1973. And here is a really big, wow, it's really big. Look at that. And here's my hand. That is massive. That is a really nice moon map. I think I'm going to put that on the workshop wall. It's the Rand McNally official map of the moon. Approximate scale 1 to 2.3 million. That's good to know. Made in USA. Interesting. All right. So let's start with the legs. We got to bend those tabs. And we have to fix the missing rubber feet. I've gone ahead and ordered some things to fix that. So I'm going to put this all back in the envelope. One, two, three. And if you look at the tips again, this one has the rubber tip, and this has a metal shaft, but no tip. All right, so here they are. 1, 2, 3. They are in fairly decent shape. With that, came off there pretty easy. Yeah, try this. In pretty good shape. Tighten it up. This one is perfectly flat. This one is bent. That's easy enough to fix. Well, hang on. We're just going to try this first. Oh, that's super soft metal. That was easy. That was super easy. Okay. But there's something kind of interesting here. This has been pushed really hard that way. This is unrolled. So I'm going to try to push this back. That's a little better. It's a little better. At least it's centered on the wood now, for the most part. It could come back a little bit more. That'll work for now. This one's the same. Got a little bit more bend to it. That was fairly easy. All right. Let's address these tips. I went ahead and I purchased these rubber tips. They're actually like bottle plugs, kind of like a cork, I guess. I think that would work. I just have to drill a hole through here. And I guess technically I don't want to drill it. I don't want to drill the hole all the way through, just about 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to get the drill bit out and see if I can drill a hole that's centered on here. Hey, that worked out surprisingly well. I'll make 3 of these. Yeah, that's good. There we go. Next up, I'm going to get the equatorial mount out, and I'm going to attach the legs. I will be taking the telescope out while I work on the mount. Look at that. There's no lens cap. Oh, forgot to take glass. All right. Carefully set this down. All right, let's go assemble this. So here's the parts. We have the equatorial mount. We have leg 1, leg 2, leg 3. We have this bolt with a wing nut. We have another one. There's one missing there. We have the 2 slow motion control cables. They're pretty nice, actually. And we have the counterweight. Now, interestingly enough, this is a bag of parts that we have. Now, I'm going to show you something. There's the moon filter. This has something that is very interesting. Do not use this. This is a sun filter. Back in the day, I guess in the 1970s, you could buy this so-called sun filter and it would screw into the bottom of an eyepiece. And it's hard to believe, but in theory, they believed that you could look at the sun with this and it would protect your eyes. It's generally accepted now that these are extremely dangerous. So I will be disposing of this so that nobody ever uses it. What else do we have in here? Well, we have, okay, there's a bolt. There's a penny from 1970. Looks like I'm going to have to find a wing nut. Fortunately, I had an extra wing nut. Let's go ahead and attach these to the bottom. We're going to build this up. So this goes towards the inside. All right. Easier said than done. It's this weird washer with dimples on it. Now, there's an eyepiece tray that's going to hold these together. I'll have to work on that next. But let's go ahead and put the slow motion cables on. Still pretty smooth, actually. That's pretty nice. By the way, if you ever try to buy these things, they're surprisingly expensive, especially if you have the, I think it's the 8mm. That's hard to find. It still moves pretty good. Okay, so let me pull out the eyepiece tray and we'll see what's going on with that. Here's the eyepiece holder and the tripod holder together. It's interesting. It's got this little light. It seems kind of broken. I'll see what I can do to fix that. And it looks like that's where the batteries went. And there's a blue light. Odd. I don't know why they don't have red lights. Okay, so I've gone ahead and ordered some parts. Here's the eyepiece tray. It has a little armature arm, like on the soldering arms that we buy, but it's missing one, so we're going to need to fix that. And so I have this one. All right. So there we go. So now we can aim this. Let's rotate this like that. And let's take a look at this light bulb. It's blue, and of course for astronomy you don't want blue. Does this unscrew? That unscrews. All right. So I went ahead and ordered some red ones. This is an old, basically it's got a filament, old incandescent, and it's I guess it's called an E10. And I ordered. You can't really just buy one, so I bought a 10-pack. And all right. Now, there's a tube that fits AA batteries. It's kind of interesting. It's got this kind of weird labeling. GE bulb number 222, 1.5 volt. And I have a couple of AA's, and they both fit in there. So I guess that goes in here. Well, does this go? Oh, there we go. It's fairly basic electronics, right? It's just got a switch. And let's take this tube of batteries, just a couple of AA's, see if they fit still. It's been 50-something years. All right, let's turn the on switch. Look at that. Nice little red bulb. Okay, pretty cool. I guess we can put this on the tripod. So here it is. Let's attach it using some washers. Before I tighten anything, I'm gonna just basically do a rough attachment. I pulled these as far apart as they'll go. Now I'll tighten them. All right, it's pretty stable. We have our nice little red light. Tuck that back in here. Pretty cool, right? Let's go back up to the top of the mount. We still have to add the counterweight. It just screws in right here. Okay, so counterweight's on. Let's take a look at all of the optics. The eyepieces are 0.965 inch diameter. I guess back in the 70s and the 80s, telescopes, and especially cheaper introductory telescopes, came with these roughly about an inch, actually. This is a modern day 1.25 inch. This is what comes with almost all telescopes these days. There's quite a bit of difference. Right? This can fit in there. But these are quite substantial. They're very weighty. So these are from early 70s in theory. And I have this is a new one that I bought recently. And these things are featherweight. These are just plastic, and that might be aluminum. But I mean, these things are super heavy. The ones that came with the Penncrest one. So drop that down. This is there's so much different in weight. And these are both 20 millimeters. But this one's pretty stout metal. So let's take a look. These are quite dirty, so I'm just going to do a quick cleanup on these. Now if you have one of these brushes, take a little bit of rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, clean them up. Take a Q-tip. It's pretty clean on the inside, so that's actually nice and shiny. So we'll do that with, now we'll go to the 6 millimeter. You can imagine, I mean, look how small that tiny little lens is. This is very similar to the one that I had when I was a kid. It had these just itty bitty eyepieces that were basically impossible to see through. It was very, very frustrating. There's actually last, let's see, 12.5 millimeter right there. Lens is so small. Okay, so those are done. So 20, 12.5, and 6. Here is the 3X Barlow. How does that look? Oh, that's quite dirty. The lens is pretty dirty, so I'm going to see if I can do a quick clean. Look at that. Oh! Oh, oh my goodness. Well, this little lens came rolling out. I guess I got a 50-50 chance of figuring out which way it goes. Well, if it doesn't work, I can always flip it. But hey, it's clean. So we'll set that over to the side. And here's a nice little diagonal. It's a heavy little thing. And is it a mirror or prism? Oh no, this one's stripped. Well, let's just get this out of the way. Okay. Get the dust off. Prism. But I do need to get this out. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and put this together, and then I'll clean up this area a little bit. We'll take our prism, carefully drop it in. We'll put our little spring back on the back. Super clean. Okay. I found a couple of things real quick. This says, I thought this had a 500 millimeter focal length, but at the back it says it has a focal length of 1,000 millimeters. But also, very interesting. There's the JC Penny. But there's a postmark on here, and it says October 1973. And the customer lived in Westminster, Colorado. So kind of interesting. Okay, so we're left with these two items here. This one is a little bit bizarre. This is obviously is the viewfinder. Basically, the end of this has it so that you can put an eyepiece in. And when you look through the instructions, they have you putting what appears to be the 20 millimeter. And they make it sound like there's a standalone, but it almost seems like you're supposed to rely on the 20 millimeter for the viewfinder. I have the cheap 20 millimeter in this little 0.965 that I can use if I want to use this in the main telescope. And I'll probably go ahead and do that. But it makes me wonder if this originally came with 2 of the 20 millimeters and one of them fit in here. One thing I wanted to try is this guy, the Poro Prism. I'm just morbidly curious what this looks like on the inside. It is actually quite dusty. It's hard to see. I have to hold it up to the light, look through it. Yeah, it's pretty dusty, but I think it's 2 of these prisms that are at a right angle. Do I want to mess with that? Or I just take the poros out, see what it looks like. Hey, there we go. So that's how a poro prism works, I guess. So the only thing left now is clean up the viewfinder. So let's take a look at this viewfinder. The lens is quite dusty, so let's pull it out of here. Well, let's see what we got. Again, you put an eyepiece in here. Let's see if this unscrews back here. So I put it in a vise, and I think it's come a little bit loose. You can hear the lens. That was really tough. It's a little silicone cylinder that I use to take lenses out like this. Because sometimes they're stacked. Alright, so this looks like they're glued together. Okay. Here's the back side. It's really hard to get to before. Put this back on. Put this back in here. Make sure not to strip it. I think I discovered the problem. Stripped, super stripped. Yeah, so they previously had glue on it. Let's see if we can fix this with some trickery. I'll cut off the excess. And we'll call this nice and clean and done. Now it's time to move on to the telescope. Now let's grab the actual telescope. All right. So here's the body of the telescope. There's a couple things we need to look at. Right here, this is the threaded nub where the viewfinder attaches. This is a broken screw of some kind, but this is where it attaches. Penncrest astronomical refractor telescope, and 60 millimeter and 1,000 millimeter focal length. All right, made in Japan, and it's got a little sticker right there. It says "Past Japan Telescope." Kind of cool. The lens is very, very dirty. It's hard to see. I'll pull this off so you can see it at close up. I'm going to wipe down the outside first, though. It's got that strange goo from the garage, so. That's a really tight fit. All right. Look at that. It's got a little baffle at the end. Boy, that is not much travel focus for a refractor, but I guess it works. Make that nice and clean, get all the chrome all shiny. It has baffles all the way down. You can see there's a lot of dust and dirt. There's some spider webs floating in there, so I'm going to take it apart a little more. There's actual spider webs. Not so hard to see, it's flat black. I'm going to get the spider webs out. And this has been cleaned before. I can see there's signs. That is pretty darn clean. All right, so I'm happy with that. We'll consider the telescope clean. Let's go ahead and attach the viewfinder. Let's put this on the mount. All right, here we go. So it's right about here. All right, that's really all there is to it. We'll put an eyepiece in. So I've always had really good luck with the Japanese refractors from the 70s and 80s. And let's go test this out on the moon. Well, I just finished with my very first test, and it didn't last very long because it's very, very cold out there. I had to break out my camping and car repair jacket. This has a lot of burn holes from campfires. It even has a big tear right there. So this is what I get out when it's really cold outside. So I learned a couple of things already. The first was a huge surprise. As you can see, when I rack the focuser tube out, that's it. You get about 2 inches of travel. And that is simply not enough to get focus on anything. It was very, very frustrating. And I thought, oh my gosh, do I have a dud of a telescope? Well, as it turns out, that's not the case. I just didn't read the user manual well enough. Because as it turns out, the focuser tube has a friction part that comes out like that. Would you believe that? So the way this works is you pull this out until you get focus on what you want to see, and then you use the knobs just for fine tuning. Look at that. I've never seen this on a telescope before, but I thought this was a pretty cool idea. This acts as sort of the rapid focus, and this is the slow motion focus. One of the things I learned real quick was that the viewfinder had to be modified slightly. As you can see here, the mount is actually tilting forward. That's not how the instructions tell you to mount it. This was originally mounted backwards, and as I was out testing, I realized this puts the viewfinder way back. So when you're trying to look through this, it keeps like hitting you in the cheekbone. So that was no good. So I took this off, I flipped it around, and I flipped the viewfinder around as well. I also realized that this is kind of an old school viewfinder. It's got the 3 knobs, but there was a lot of play between the back end and the tube of the viewfinder. So I put some electrical tape there, and it's now a very tight fit. It acts as a fulcrum point. And so these 3 screws give a very precise aiming capability. And the last thing I learned in the brief time that I was out there was that the eyepieces are kind of interesting. This is the 20 millimeter, and that one works okay. But when you get into the 6 millimeter and the 12.5, well, these things are just incredibly small. They're itty bitty, they're tiny, and they're very, very frustrating to use. And to be honest, it brought back memories of my very first refractor telescope from JC Penny in the early 1980s. And I remember that one actually, I think, had a 4 millimeter, and it was super frustrating to use. And I guess it's no surprise that I stopped using it. But the good news is, you know, we're so used to the modern day 1.25" eyepieces that we're in luck. Because here's a commercial adapter you can get that converts from the 965 to 1.25". And if you want, you can actually download a version of this from Thingiverse and print it out on your own 3D printer, and it just drops in wherever there's a 0.965 eyepiece. And would you look at that? I found that this is so much less frustrating. I like the modern eyepieces with the larger lenses on top. Now, one of the secondary benefits of this is that I can now attach a smartphone adapter, the clamping type, on here to take cool pictures. So that's what we're going to do next. I'm going to warm my hands up here in the astronomy garage, and I'm going to take it back outside and see if we can get a cool image of the moon and maybe even Jupiter.
This image of the moon is really sharp with nice crisp edges, but you can see the wind is really knocking it around. That's one of the disadvantages of these old-style wooden tripods, and it's one of the main reasons why I still love Dobsonian mounts. Now here's Jupiter, but unfortunately the wind was knocking it around so much that it basically made it almost impossible to view. So maybe some other time.
Well, the test is over and we're back inside the astronomy garage trying to warm up. As you saw from the images, I think it was a pretty successful test. Now there were a couple things that went into that. We've replaced the old 0.965" eyepieces with more modern 1.25" eyepieces. Now, not all 965 eyepieces are bad. It's just that these happen to be, I guess, slightly lower quality than what we had from just modern mass-produced eyepieces. So I think that these did a very good job. And of course, one other thing that led to the very sharp edges of the moon are the fact that The focal ratio on this telescope is almost 17. That's one of the tricks for getting rid of chromatic aberration. Just make your refractor longer and longer. Thanks for joining me on this journey where I got to refurbish an old JC Penny style telescope. I will say that I think the optics on this were probably better than the one that I had when I was a kid back in the early 1980s. I recently finished a deep dive history into the Burd-Jones telescope, which I have to say is probably one of the more interesting styles of telescope out there. And you can click on it here and watch that video. Now, spoiler alert, one of the inventors was blind. It's a pretty poignant part of the story. So go ahead and click on that link if you want to watch that. But thanks for watching, and clear skies.